Hello and welcome to episode 116 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm the father of the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry. And we are coming off of an IKB week. Yes, that's right. IKB. I know better. I know better than to get locked on to Brandon Cooks in cash, a career-long, inconsistent player who you could argue is the number 3 option on his own team. I know better than to force DJ Moore when Odell Beckham and Kenny Galladay are right there, when Robbie Anderson is threatening DJ Moore. I know better than to get swayed maybe by some recency bias on Tyler Lockett instead of looking ahead with Odell Beckham. I know better than to pay up at D/ST. I just never do it. And I know I've said it on here before, but when I play guys in cash who I think are egregious tournament plays, I just know it's bad, and it's something that I don't want to do. Before the slate, I said there's no shot that I'd play Cooks in tournaments. The field is just way too hot on him. There's no way I'd play Troutman. Thought the ceiling was 3 or 4 targets. Although I'll get to why Troutman worked in a minute. But there's no way I'd play DJ Moore at elevated ownership. So I think anytime you lose in cash, it's rough, but it's especially tough when you feel like you were at least somewhat on it this week. I want to bring up a couple thoughts on positional stuff. First at tight end, and the state of the position is so bad, particularly on some of these main slates where we haven't had Kelsey or Kittle or Andrews at times, but the state of the position is so bad that the winning lineups each week are taking zeros and 1.2 and 3.4 points at tight end. And they're winning on DraftKings. And of course this makes sense when we spend $2,500 on Troutman or $3K on LT3. They don't hurt us at all because the position tops out at 10 points for a lot more salary. And it just keeps happening. So that's a big reason why I was fine with punting on Troutman, even though I knew this air ball was really in the meaty part of his range. Instead of forcing someone like Evan Ingram or Hawkinson or even Waller, who I did like on DraftKings, just punt it off. Is that the right strategy every week at tight end? We will see. It depends on pricing and spots for sure. But, the first month, it has worked. Just totally punting it off at tight end. The second thing I want to say is at quarterback. So this week 4, was an old school quarterback pricing week on DraftKings. Like 5 years ago, the quarterbacks were in the 7Ks and the 8Ks, and then there would be these streamers in the low 5Ks. And the pricing gap was wide enough that no one sharp played the expensive quarterbacks in cash. That changed some this year when the quarterback pricing had the streamers priced within 1K of guys like Kyler and Josh Allen and Dak, right? But in week 4, we caught Ryan Fitzpatrick at 5,400, while all the other viable quarterbacks were 7,200 or more. And you can see why it works. Quarterback scoring is going to be so bunched, really tightly from a projection basis. And it's the easiest position to project because opportunity is going to be roughly the same. So it's just something to keep an eye on going forward at quarterback. Speaking of easiest to project, the reason spending down in cash at defense is almost always correct is because it's so hard to project. I mean, it's often just random in terms of turnovers, which teams fall on a fumble, which teams happen to take a kickoff to the house or whatever. And if you read the Millie Maker article, the correlation between D/ST scoring and ownership is pathetic. Like as a field, we're just so bad at least 2 times worse than any other position. So much like tight end, we're better off just punting it in cash. So yeah, I thought the Bucks and the Ravens were in an unreal spot, but 1,000 is typically going to be better used elsewhere in cash. In tournaments, it's obviously different, ownership considerations and elite spots. And by the way, if the Chiefs were on the main slate at home against Brian Hoyer / Jarrett Stidham, maybe they would have been an option to pay up for too, and that would have hit. So I don't want to have too much recency bias over the Bucks and Ravens stuff. And then wide receiver, this is the big thing to me. Every week this year on DraftKings, there have been absurdly strong values in the high 5K up to mid 6K range, factoring in the state of the NFL, the way teams are scoring, the quality of quarterback play, the way games are being officiated. It's just gotten to a point where the floor/ceiling combos of some mid-range wide receivers, they almost feel better than running backs. And I'm not ready to jump to that conclusion fully yet. But, things like Tyler Lockett and DJ Moore are going to happen. But Odell and Galladay and Metcalf and Amari and Thielen and Mike Evans and Will Fuller and Devontae Parker, those were examples from week 4. True alphas 1A on their team in good spots. I mean, I should be giving more consideration to those guys in cash over running backs. Maybe. So I want to be conscious of that going forward. At least consider it. At least consider it. Comparing an 8K Zeke to a 6,400 Mike Evans and stuff like that. I think that Zeke is still right in cash there, but I at least want to be open to other ideas. Anyway, despite all the mistakes, I could have had a fine week if I had gotten the last 2v2 right. It was Lockett and Ryan Fitzpatrick versus Odell Beckham and Deshaun Watson. I just want to be clear that yes, it's thin, and I will never sit here and say, oh man, I played fine. I just missed that 2v2. I got unlucky. I was on the wrong side. No, that's the whole game in cash, right? Getting 2v2s, getting 3v3s right is the game, especially in double ups and 50-50s. If you're not up for that life, that's okay. It really is. And a lot of pros have scaled back their cash play as well. I get it. I feel like now is a good time to remind everyone about realistic ROIs and expectations. Again, if you're winning at 5% or, up to 15% ROI in cash over the course of a season, it was a really good season. And at those rates, we're going to eat some losses. We can't let it hover over us. So it's done. Not thinking about it anymore. Okay, let's get to GPPs. And I had it, man. I had it. Remember last week I said that, before the slate that the GPP winning stack was actually, spotted. I mean, easy to spot, which is just wild. Just never happens. In week 3, it was Russ, Metcalf, Lockett, bring it back with Gallup. Easy game, right? Well, in week 4, someone asked on the last minute live stream on Sunday with Evan and I, what's the best stack for single entry? I said the obvious one, Dak, Amari, one of Schultz, Lamb, or Gallup, and bring it back with Odell. And dear God, I mean, that was I didn't actually think that would be the one that you needed to win, but I mean, that was it again. I mean, it's just insane, just wild. So anyways, I had that stack in the juke, the $400 single entry. I finished, I think 15th place with Daryl Henderson and Josh Jacobs. I would have won with literally any other running back combo, Mike Davis, Ronald Jones. The thing is, Daryl Henderson and Joe Mixon were the same price, and I actually thought a lot about that decision. In hindsight, I think it was a pretty bad mistake to go D-Hendo over Mixon here. First of all, from a GPP construction standpoint, I knew the Cowboys stuff with Odell would be pretty owned. And I also had Fuller and Golladay in this lineup, who I knew would be owned too. So with Henderson projecting for far more ownership than Mixon, especially after the injury, Mixon should have been the play. And you could say, well, why more ownership on Mixon than D-Hendo? Well, the injury scare is always gonna drive down ownership, but as someone who follows everything so close, I knew the reports were there that this Mixon injury was really minor. The Bengals felt fine about his status. Travion Williams was inactive. And then on the D-Hendo side, yeah, he broke out in week 3, but the snap rates, the underlying usage, that was still split with Malcolm Brown. And we know that this fake sharp, Sean McVay, he's obsessed with Malcolm Brown. And obviously Mixon had this elite matchup with Jacksonville. So yeah, I'm pretty sick about, not even about the money, about winning the juke or whatever, just winning a tournament, and I literally had it. Pretty tilted. And for the ultimate needle, Dink sent in a question. He said, if 4 weeks ago you drafted one player nearly 100 spots before another player, is that player a better GPP play at the same price? So yeah, I mean, what can I say? Just egregious. Just stings. Stings bad. But I will say I'm really liking building, hand building 6 or 10 lineups per week and then getting them in some higher stake stuff. It's far more interesting to me than the large field lottos. Even though the payouts aren't life-changing, I think first place in the juke was like $15K. I just find it more interesting. But shout out to Leone, to Ding, to a ton of ETR people who rode the DAX stacks with Odell to some really big wins. Happy for you all. Speaking of Daryl Henderson, I mean, good Lord, I knew he'd be owned, but he was 23% in the Millie Maker, the second highest owned running back. Insane. I thought everyone would play Kamara and Zeke and Mike Davis. Those were literally the only running backs I had in my pool for cash. But it just another example of the bubble, and I try to step out of the bubble when I do the ownership projections, but always have to remind myself that we're in a bubble on Twitter, and ETR is a fraction, an infinitesimal subsection of the player pool of the field on DraftKings. So, yeah, D. Henderson getting to 23%. It's quite aggressive. Okay, enough is enough. Let's get to everyone's favorite portion of the program. The listener questions. Producer Luke, hit the theme music. Okay, got a ton of good ones. Really appreciate the questions. As always, going to do 7 today. Question 1 from Kinseth. If you could choose to live in your father's generation, would you if it meant no DFS? Being in the prime of your life in the 70s, 80s, 90s feels way better than the 2000s to 2020s. Interesting question. I think there's a big, grass is always greener, a big remember the good old days sentiment out there from every generation, I reminisce about the 90s. Those were great times, man. My friend's dad reminisces about the 60s. I remember one time we were just like busting his balls saying, hey, Rick, you've been with 100 women? And he thinks, and he looks at us and he goes, yeah, maybe in 1969. So I don't know. I mean, it's always easy to look back and think, that was great because typically younger is better, right? Before you're overwhelmed with the responsibility of family and work and having a ton of people relying on you on both those settings and physical and mental issues that come up as you get older. Now, as for the 70s, 80s, 90s, and DFS, I mean, I would have been okay with that. You don't even know what DFS is in the 70s, 80s, 90s. I think at that time, sports betting lines were actually so inefficient that you could out information the market and really actually win big. Like always, I love the old stories about guys hanging out in airports, waiting for out-of-town newspapers to get trashed so they could read them to find out who was hurt because there was no other way to get information. Calling up college newspaper reporters, scorekeepers, asking them if guys are playing, just looking for injury information that way. And so that seems like a grind that I would have enjoyed back then. But yeah, in general, it's tough to say about that time period, the 70s and 80s. I was born in 82, so all I really know about those time periods are what people say or movies or pop culture, and that's all so glorified, just like the times now will be. Question 2 from Stephen Madera. He says, do you think DFS is more profitable than sports betting? If so, why? Is it because you're playing versus others instead of playing versus the house? Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, any peer-to-peer game is always going to be more profitable. A friend of the show, Will Jaffe, know him from the old poker days. He did a great rant on this on his Twitter, A Tough Convo. I'd recommend you guys go find that. But, look, I love people. I know people love to say how many units they're up, sports betting and how great they are on Twitter. And I mean, 99.9% of them are just lying, like just straight lying. I don't know why, but dudes love to lie about money and sex. It's wild. Like, there's so many dudes that I used to know, like if they said they were on the hashtag team, like I wouldn't believe them. I would actually have to see it with my own eyes to verify. I mean, to me, it's GTO to talk about being poor and women hating you, but that's another topic altogether. Anyways, back to sports betting. To beat widely available lines in major sports at liquid, in other words, getting 4 figures or more on a game, like there just aren't very many people doing it. And the ones that are winning 3% or 5% and just getting in a ton of volume on that small edge. Now compare that to us DFS players. I mean, I can find games against some hungover mouth breather making a lineup on his phone at 12:45 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, just, mashing buttons. I can get games against, some dolts, smashing natty ices against their forehead all weekend. I can simply get games against people not working that hard, not paying attention. They have no idea that Justin Jefferson is past BC Johnson. They have no clue how important it is that Malcolm Brown is actually playing half the snaps or whatever. So yeah, I think that for most people, peer-to-peer is going to generate bigger edges. And on top of all that, I mean, if you get really good at sports betting, if you're one of the few people who can actually originate your own lines through modeling and you can actually win, you're going to be challenged to get action down. I mean, getting cut off, getting limited, it's very, very real. So then the game isn't even finding the bets and figuring out who to bet on. It's figuring out how to even get money down. And there's none of that in DFS and peer-to-peer. You can always get action to some degree. Question 3 from Julian. He says, will you finally embrace daddy time and take up golf with CSU Ram 88 once you move to the best part of the country? Yeah, look, I don't have a problem with golf. I really don't. It's cool. But here's the thing. While I am able to play actual sports, not games, sports, that's what I am going to do. So I play basketball, I play tennis, I play racquetball, I sweat, I grunt, I play super hard. When it's over, I feel like I can't move. It's amazing. When I can no longer do that physically, then I'll play golf. It's really that simple. Now, if you want to say, well, we're not really playing golf, let's go out with the boys, we'll have a few beers, a few laughs, bet some props on the course, that's a different story. Of course I'm up for that, of course. But just at this point in my life, I'm either working or I'm helping take care of 2 kids. Like, literally, that's all the time I have. Going to the golf course to hang for 3, 4, 5 hours is just not possible. Like 18 holes of golf, it's like mind blowing to me. Like it's just ridiculous. Give me a nice, 6-hole course. Maybe I'm in. Question 4 from Kyle. With the cash games getting harder as the field gets sharper, do you find yourself wanting to play more tournaments? You still have a chance to double up with a shot at an actual ceiling. Yeah, I already talked about this a little bit, but for sure I do. And as I mentioned, I still have absolutely zero desire to play the lottos, the stuff with tens of thousands of entries where you need to hit the actual stones to win, and 10th place out of a zillion, you win dust. Like, I just have no interest in that. But I've really been enjoying building, like I said, 6, 7, 8 lineups, putting them in some higher stakes, smaller field stuff, thinking about players who I think will be over-owned in them, thinking about how stacks fit together, knowing I can miss on a guy and still win, knowing I can play the best plays and still be contrarian enough. I don't think, that take is really about cash games getting harder per se, but it's just about trying to have more fun, trying to give myself a chance at some more scores and just diversifying action a little bit. I will say it is distracting though, it's distracting. Even managing just 6, 7, or 8 lineups and thinking about those right up to lock is distracting from, maybe putting enough time and thought on Sunday morning into the cash lineup. So just kind of is what it is. Question 5 from Kramer. He says, do you have any thoughts on the boosted odds for the various new online sports books? How plus EV are they actually? Yeah, so I'm here in Pennsylvania. The competition for market share between sports books is just so heated. And that's great for the consumer. And I don't even mean like the sign-up bonuses. They're just constantly giving away free money even after you sign up. Not a ton, but $50 here, $25 there, or always these odds boosts. And by the way, all odds boost means is instead of Chiefs, minus 110 ml, they make Chiefs plus 125. And yes, if you know anything about sports betting, odds boosts like that make all the difference. Moving a line 10 cents can make something that wasn't a bet into a very, very good bet. So yes, I'd bet all the odds boost, after you compare the line to the market to make sure you're still getting a really good price. I would bet all the odds boost if you're trying to grind up a small roll, assuming that it's like by far the best price in market. Question 6 from Jake Mason. He says, are you still trading stocks? If so, how is that going? You know what it is about stocks, man? It seemed too easy. Like something just didn't feel right. I mean, we have Portnoy out here, Dave Portnoy from Barstool out here just literally jumbling up letters in a Scrabble bag and then buying like hundreds of thousands of dollars of stock of whatever letters come up and just printing. It just doesn't seem right. And when I feel like something is too good to be true, I usually just back off. Like I don't know enough about it. I don't understand it well enough to know why it is what it is. Why does it seem so easy? I'd encourage people interested in this to go back and listen to the podcast I did, probably March or April with Jason Strasser. And he's someone who actually knows and who actually understands what's going on. So basically the answer to Jake's question is no, I'm not trading stocks. I'd prefer to really feel like I'm working for it. Maybe it's a crazy take, but it just doesn't feel right to me. And, maybe if I was like a stock gambler, trader for a living, I'd be more comfortable. Just like those guys probably realize they can't show up on Sunday and print in DFS. Like it should be hard to win money, right? It just doesn't feel right. Question 7 from Ryan Noonan. My wife and I have begun trying, but after consulting with GenderLabs and reading Skin to Fur, I know we're not in the ideal gender optimization window this week. I want to stay on the team though, so how do I handle my ADOP and my POE rate at release? Yeah, well, thanks for reading the book, Ryan, Skin to Fur. I appreciate it. Look, man, there are a lot of big shots out there who claim, they're on the POM, the pull-out method, and they have 100% hit rate. Stop it. Either you're lying or you're just running pure and you don't know it. Kind of reminds me of poker when some idiot binks a tournament and all of a sudden he thinks he's Phil Galfond now. It can be really hard in gambling to distinguish between running hot and playing well. It can be tough to distinguish when the edges are thin. Like it's actually possible to run hot for a year or even 2. It really is. And so if you've been on POM, pull-out method, for a long time, you said you've throttled down your PPM, your pumps per minute, and therefore you have 100% hit rate. I'm just skeptical, man. So no, Ryan, my advice here is to go back to what I talked about in episode 104. You got to condom up, bud. It'll undoubtedly increase your POE, your pumps over expectation. It'll get you back into the window you need to be in for gender optimization. All right, that is going to do it for another edition of the solo pod. I will be back with Silva for the team by team pods. I will also be back with Silva and Wiggins on Friday night for the DFS slate breakdown. You will have Leone and Dink talking GPPs on Saturday, and then Evan and I back on Sunday morning for the last minute live stream before the main slate. So, for producer Luke, for Jerry, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.